So I want to separate these existing objects in Illustrator into separate layers. And the number of layers really depends on how detailed you want to be able to get in Photoshop. But I will go ahead and create 2 more layers and start organizing things from front to back or back to front. So here's this bird. I think the bird can be on the same layer with the stars, with this star. And so I'll move this dot up into this new layer. So that's separated out. And then all the rest of the lines and the panels, which are these lines and these panels, if I cut them, that's what I have left there. Oops, didn't get these lines selected. Let's try that again. Lines and panels. So I'll cut Command X, Command Z to put it back. And this is just all things that are lines, so I'll put that on top. So I have that separate now. This little panel here probably should be on the lines and panels layer. And then this one will become the text layer, text 1. The text, as it is right now, if you're looking on screen, is actually kind of multi-layered. So I'm going to make another layer here called text 2. And I know it's probably difficult to see these layer names, so I'll go to Panel Options and use large thumbnails. It's a little bit better. So the topmost elements of this text, if I cut these, Command X, you can see that they're actually, Command Z, the fills, so the top fills for the text. So I'll move those onto another layer, and then there's actually one more here. But just for the sake of having an easier time here, I'll make a new layer and just move it right up there. So this one should be text 3, and this one should be text 2. So now I have it all broken down. Bottommost pieces, things that go on top. If I'm going to fill the oval shape and the lines, I might want them beneath everything. So now I have from top to bottom, top, next layer down, next layer down, next layer down. It might be easier or smarter to move these pieces here for flavors and finest onto another layer as well. So these are actually now really separated pretty discreetly. Each item could be selected much more easily on its own in Photoshop if I wanted to do that. Even this piece here, that might want to be its own layer. So I'll make another layer here. I'll call this one Panel. Okay. So I've got to move that panel up to that layer. All right, so bottom, next, 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 next. And now everything is selectable by itself in Photoshop. Here I can go File, and I'll do a Save As, Logo, Layered, save it, and then File, Save As, and here, no Photoshop, File, Export, File, Save As, reading is fundamental, Illustrator, Photo, I can save it as an Adobe PDF. Why can't I get this to save as an Illustrator file? File. Checking myself here. Export as. Okay. Export as. Export as is the magic here. Photoshop PSD. Export as. Logo layered PSD. And because I put everything that I needed to be really in separate layers, it won't come in as a flattened object. So again, it was Saving it here. Export as. Here is the color model. The color model is going to assume the Illustrator color model, not the Photoshop default model, but the printing color model of CMYK. If for some reason I needed this to be really giant, I can change the resolution to something other, like 600 or 1200 if I need to make a big giant billboard size sticker. But I'll leave it on 300. Yes, I want layers, that's the point. If I have the text as text and not as outlines, which I think this is text and not outlines in this particular file, I should be able to edit the text in Photoshop. And then the ICC profile is for web coded, so the color of the file that I'm going to have in Photoshop will be a truly print or a correct print CMYK format, not some other CMYK format that won't look right when it's printed. And it's writing the Photoshop file, and now it's done. So if I go into Photoshop, and I'll open my file, Command O. And in my Documents folder, logo layered PSD, there it is. And I click Open. Okay, so this is what it looks like in Photoshop. Panel options, I'm going to reset them. Can't, that's as big as they get. So we're stuck with that. But as you can see here, I can start looking at each piece and its sub-pieces individually. So if I go to the most bottom layer here, I have these lines, and this is where you can start using a layer's negative space or its black and white pixels as selections. This idea of building your content in Illustrator instead of in Photoshop and coloring it here is a little old school, but here's the deal. So if I'm looking at this layer called layer 3, I might want to call this panel, or BKG for background, panel, and lines or flourishes. I'm just calling it lines. My procedure is to add a new layer on top of that layer. And it went to the very top, and I'm going to put it inside here. So I have this blank layer. Then, if you're watching, this is kind of important, nice thing to know how to do. With this layer selected, I'm going to choose Select Load Selection, and using the negative or the transparent pixels, background panel and line transparency, I'm going to use that as a new selection. So if I click OK and I hide that layer, I don't know how well you can see that, not too bad. You can see all these little marching ants. So these marching ants represent where I could start filling this with color. So if I take my brush tool, really take my brush tool, make my brush tool smaller, and click on this layer that I want to work with, I'm ostensibly painting red in these lines, everywhere these dotted lines are. I could also make it faster by going Option Delete, and that fills with the foreground color. If I deselect, Command D, I now have red lines where there were black lines because the black line allowed me to fill that. important thing about drawing ovals and rectangles is that you can always find you can always draw that shape over again. In this case, this ellipse with a selection tool, if you can find the top and or side. So I'm going to add another layer, and using this spot where I just placed the guides, I dragged these ruler guides out of the rulers using the ellipse selection tool. If I click and drag from that corner, there's the fill of that shape. It's on its own layer. That's just going to be the fill. And I will fill that with something not too scary. Let's go with a dark blue. Option delete. Command D. Deselect. So here's my little lines on top of my blue shape. This blue shape, Command U, could always have the colors changed of it. Right? And I'll click cancel, just leaving it like this. Next is this little panel. It has a black line on it. I may or may not want to keep that black line. I might want that black line to be a separate color. So this one is going to be something like this. I will duplicate this layer, hide. I tend to want to start stacking these down here, putting them away. And then with this new layer, the little panel copy, it's select load selection. This will fill the entire panel. I'll do it with this purple color. Option delete. If I show this black one, this white and black one on top of it, I could set that to being multiply. So the black line stays. You might want to duplicate this one again. It's really helpful to keep these extra pieces hiding under there. And this one that's showing now, let's hide that one too. This one that's showing now, Command L. This is an important feature in Photoshop where you can tell black pixels to become gray with this. Am I on the right layer? Yes. Feels like I'm not, but there. I'm making this lighter. Doesn't look like anything's happening. If I change this to overlay, so I can mix color that way and get the outline still on there. You could also remove the fill and just have the line. Okay, so each layer then, as I start showing that piece that I want to change, it's select, load selection, and it's the transparency of that element, which I generally would prefer to paint in Photoshop on a new layer. So I just see the outline of the pixels, sample a color. It's actually already in my fill here, but Option delete, Command D, show the next layer. This one looks like I have a lot of pieces on here. I should hide some of these and just do this top text. And again, it's select, load selection, layer transparency, add a new layer, hide the other layer, and do the fill. Does it make sense? So this gives you the ability to try filling this in different ways than you might be as comfortable or less comfortable or more comfortable doing this in Illustrator by loading the transparency or the negative or white space around the black lines. Could do a really scary gradient in here. Make you sense it? Okay. So that is a little tip, how to bring in Illustrator files and paint them as Photoshop layers. Each piece becoming select, load selection. Its new selection is then its own layer which gets painted separately. I can do these two at the same time here if I merge them. Command E into one piece. Command E, do it. Doesn't want to. Command E. Oh, I have to rasterize that layer. Let's do it like this. Command E. Yeah, there we go. I got it. And then select, load selection, yada yada, hide, new layer, and fill that guy. I think I'll fill it with white. For this layer, the bird layer, I think I'll make the bird layer be, again, a duplicate, and see if I can show you that technique I was trying to show you with the levels. So Command L, the bird is black. If I try to change the color using hue adjust, it's not going to change because it's black. But as I slide the slider, that black becomes gray. So I've reassigned this to a light gray color, and then I could Command U and colorize it. I have my little black star. Load selection on this one. Hide it and add the new layer. Done. And now it's nice because you could duplicate the layers, resave the file as a new name, and do other color variations on it with hue adjust. It might be just as interesting and easy to use something like this for the layer comp idea. So if I take one of these layers and I change it, Command U for hue saturation. So now I've changed this gradient to something else. Then I can use under Window, and this is layer comps. So I can call this document state new layer comp. I'll call this one strawberry. Strawberry light colors. And then here I can change this one and even duplicate this thing. Change the color of that. Command U. Let's go down this way. Make it darker. And then again, layer comps. Click. Using my comp panel. Add a new layer comp, and I'll call this one blueberry. So I can switch between this one versus this one. And this is then possible for you to do File, Save As, and save each layer out separately as its own thing. We'll click Cancel here. Cancel. And I can do File, Save As, Layers. If I click this off, I can save them out as JPEGs, TIFFs for the final export, whatever you ended up keeping. All right, any questions?